Welcome to this online lecture for Western Civ 1. Today we're going to switch gears. We're going to move away from the discussion of Christianity and Western Europe, and we're going to talk a little bit about the rise of another great religion, and that, of course, is Islam. As always, there are some key terms that you should be able to track by the time this lecture is over, as well as some questions that you should be able to answer as well. Anyway, let's get to it. When it comes to the great religions of the world, Islam is comparatively young. After all, Islam got started just in the 7th century CE. By comparison, Christianity was about 600 years old when Islam was just getting started. And Judaism, which was the religion of the Hebrews, was founded more than 1,000 years before that. Despite that late start, Islam now numbers 1.6 billion followers in the world. That makes it the second largest religion with 23% of the world's population. Only Christianity is larger. Currently, there are about 2.18 billion Christians in the world, or about 33% of the population. So, where did Islam come from? Islam got its start in the Arabian Peninsula. The peninsula was dominated by Bedouin tribesmen. The Bedouins were nomadic, making their living from the established trade routes across the desert. Religiously, they were polytheistic. One of their most important shrines was the Kaaba, in the city of Mecca, which housed the remains of an ancient meteor that had fallen to earth thousands of years earlier. Religion was one of the few things that tied Bedouins together, however. The tribesmen were divided, and they often fought one another. Something else we need to understand about the Arabian Peninsula is that in the 7th century, it really was a crossroads between East and West. It was right between the Byzantine and Persian empires. Now, this is going to have important consequences for the region, as Christian and Jewish traders will make their way through the peninsula on their way east. Their ideas and their monotheistic faith will influence some of the peoples that they encounter. It was into this world that Muhammad was born. He was born to a merchant family in 570 CE, but his parents died when he was just 5. Nevertheless, when he became an adult, he made a smart marriage and married a rich widow. But then when he was 40, something changed. When he was 40, he claimed that he began to experience a series of visions that he believed were inspired by God, or also known as Allah. In these visions, the angel Gabriel came to him and told him that he was to be a great prophet to his people. Over the next 20 years, he would receive more than 100 visions or revelations. These revelations told him that the people had moved away from the true worship of Allah. They should worship Allah and only Allah. Now, to fully see the connections between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, we need to understand that Allah was the same God worshipped by Jews and Christians. Therefore, Muhammad did not reject previous religions. Instead, he felt he was simply the last in a long line of prophets that dated back to Abraham and Moses. Jesus, too, was a prophet, and he was also to be respected. He was not, however, to be worshipped as the Son of God. After Muhammad's death in 632 CE, accounts of the revelations given to him were gathered together in a book known as the Quran. Initially, Muhammad's teachings were rejected in Mecca, so he and his family fled to another city named Medina. There, Muhammad was successful at converting a number of the local Bedouins. One secret to his success was that he worked to incorporate the beliefs of the Bedouins. For example, while he taught that the meteor in the Kaaba was not a god, he did continue to allow the people to worship there, arguing that the rock was a gift from Allah. In 628 CE, Muhammad returned to Mecca, surrounded by his army of new believers and followers. The people in Mecca now revered their former son as a great prophet, and they too converted to Islam. But now let's spend a little bit of time trying to understand what it was that Muhammad was teaching and what it is that Muslims today believe. First of all, let's begin with the word Islam itself. In the Arabic language, Islam means surrender to God. At the same time, a Muslim is, quote, one who submits, end quote. Now, to be a Muslim, one must first accept Allah as your God and Muhammad as your prophet. To live life as a Muslim, one also must follow what they call the 5 pillars of faith. The first pillar is the acceptance of Allah as the only God. Muslims are strict monotheists. They also argue that the Quran is the word of Allah. The second pillar is prayer. Muslims are expected to pray 5 times a day. The third pillar is charity. Muslims are expected to donate a portion of their income to the needy. The fourth pillar is fasting. All Muslims are instructed to fast during the month of Ramadan. This is in honor of Allah's revelation of the Quran to Muhammad. The last pillar is pilgrimage. All Muslims are expected to visit the city of Mecca at least once in their lifetime. This trip is called the Hajj. Once Islam conquered the city of Mecca, it spread like wildfire. Like Christian missionaries, early Muslims were excellent at converting others to the faith. They also used military might to conquer much of the Mediterranean world. For example, between 640 and 642 CE, they conquered the Byzantine provinces of Egypt and Syria. Between 637 and 650 CE, they even conquered the huge and very powerful Persian Empire. And in 725 CE, they will conquer Spain. So, what was the secret to Islam's success? Well, for one thing, Islam was open to anyone. Unlike the Hebrew faith, one did not have to be an Arab to be a Muslim. One needed only to accept Allah as God and follow the 5 pillars. In some way, this makes Islam very similar to Christianity. Remember, Christianity practiced or preached the notion of universalism, that anyone could be a Christian if you simply accepted the belief in Jesus Christ. Islam is similar to that. You simply have to accept Allah as your God and Muhammad as the prophet, and you can be a Muslim. You don't have to be an Arab. Another secret was jihad. But what does jihad mean? The word jihad means struggle. Now, Muslims recognize 2 kinds of jihad. The first, known as the greater jihad, is something that goes on inside every believer. This struggle is to maintain the 5 pillars and to live a good life. The lesser jihad means a struggle against non-believers. Islam argued that non-believers, especially pagans, could be forced to convert to Islam. If they refused, they would be killed. Again, this did not apply to all non-believers. Christians and Jews were often given special tolerance due to the similarities of the 3 faiths. In fact, this tolerance may have won them converts among Jews and Christians. Christians, as we have seen, were often denounced by the church if they did not follow Orthodox church teaching. Many found greater freedom within the Islamic community. Nevertheless, there were limits to Islam's success. In a campaign fought from 717 to 718, Islamic armies failed to conquer the Byzantine Empire's capital at Constantinople. A decade later, their invasion of Europe was stopped by Christians at the Battle of Poitiers, also known as the Battle of Tours. Still, by the 8th century, Islam was one of the most powerful forces in the world. They controlled vast wealth and millions of people. Moreover, the conquest of Egypt and Persia will bring ancient learning and knowledge into their world. And that's one of the reasons why they're going to be important to Western civilization.